Truck drivers, what's a creepy story you've got from the middle of nowhere? Not sure if this story is creepy, but it's definitely scary. My father was a truck driver in East Africa in the 80s and early 90s. During the years leading up to the Rwandan genocide, my father was passing through Rwanda. He reached a checkpoint and was forcibly removed from his truck at gunpoint. Apparently he looked like he belonged to the Tutsi tribe and they put him in a cage with other Tutsi prisoners. He tried communicating that he isn't Rwandan, but no one spoke the same language as him. Every night they would take about 5 people from the cage and slaughter them in front of him. After the third night, he saw a man that spoke a little bit of Swahili, which my dad spoke, and told him that he's not Rwandan and showed him his ID. Somehow that guy got him out and he was handed the keys to his truck and was on his way. Jesus. I'm so glad your dad survived, but my heart breaks for the others. I bet he had some major trauma from seeing people killed in front of him. Driving through an abandoned section of Baltimore at 3 in the morning, my CB radio turned itself on and crackled for a bit. Out of nowhere some voice over the radio said in a deep southern drawl, "I ain't got no panties on." I could see up and down the interstate for miles and saw not one set of headlights. That was Fred. He just wanted you to know he didn't have no panties on. Honestly, though, I have no idea why or when that started, but I've heard it for over 26 years. Leave the CB on, and you will hear it at least once a day. Always a southern drawl, and always said in a harsh whisper. I know it's a thing, and I've heard it multiple times before and since. Now, the fact that there was no one around us what creeped me out. What do you mean by, it's a thing? Like a joke or some creep code? I also need answers. Oh boy, did I go down the Google hole with this one. Apparently there was an older guy in Oklahoma City who went by the handle Bam Bam on CB Radio Channel 19, and had a recording of the "I Ain't Got No Panties On" that would play every so often on his ridiculously, illegally overpowered CB radio setup. Later he had another creepy recording head play. He was infamous amongst truckers and amateur radio operators across the country, because when atmospheric conditions were right, his signal would skip halfway around the country. His name was Klaus Kramer, and he got busted by the FCC at least twice, and was fined $10,000. This was around 2001, and the docs of his FCC trouble are public. Edit, what I forgot to add was that it became a stupid in-joke amongst bored truckers, or those trying to annoy, so the phrase lives on even though Klaus' original hijinks have been squashed. Money well spent. My dad drove a truck between Edinburgh and London and tells this story often. He was driving down the motorway and looked to his right, saw a woman with a Miss Trunchbull bun, as he describes it, staring at him with a terrified expression from a car next to him. Before he really knows how to react, the car pulls off at the next exit and my dad, although shaken, carries on. About half an hour later a different car with a different driver pulls alongside my dad, with the same woman in the passenger seat, with the same expression on her face. My dad thinks duck this and plans to pull into the next services to report, as even if it's nothing misunderstanding, better to be safe than sorry, right? Anyway, the car disappears before he can get any details, plates etc., and he thinks there is no point calling the police with no details, so he carries on driving. Literally about 4 hours later, almost in London, yet another car pulls alongside him with the same woman, same Miss Trunchbull hair, same terrified expression, except this time she appears to be screaming at my dad through the window, so my dad pulls over into a lay-by and calls the police. Apparently they have received 3 other calls about the same woman car in the same area in the last few minutes. It is unfortunately anticlimactic, as he never heard anything more about it, but he didn't see her again, although he kept an eye on the news, didn't see anything about it. Hopefully it's just a giant coincidence. Who knows? The repeating nature of this one reminds me of one weird story back when I was in high school. It was summer and my dad's birthday, so we drove to a casino 2 hours away to watch a boxing match with my uncle. It finishes and we drive back the same night. We're nearing a canyon with no phone reception, so we call my mom and tell her we'll be home soon. Canyon usually takes about 30 minutes with no traffic. It's around midnight. So we enter the canyon and we're all pretty tired. To keep us talking we start telling stories, most of them creepy stories. This goes on for a while and it feels like time is passing in a haze. We pass this butte in the canyon and suddenly I get deja vu. I'm convinced we already passed that before. All of us have driven this canyon 100 times and know the layout. We keep talking, and then we pass the same butte again. This time I pointed out and my dad and uncle notice the time, it's 1 a.m., and we're still not home. So we all start to get a bit freaked out. We stop talking and just watch the road slowly pass by. Now that we're paying attention though, time seems to catch up. We exit the canyon around 1:15 a.m. and call my mom, who is freaked out she hadn't heard from us. We still to this day have no idea where that extra 45 minutes or so went. Dang, it's way too late for me to be reading creepy stuff like this. Not a trucker, but I had a college teammate from Miami tell a story that he swears on to this day. He and his girlfriend were making the drive to Naples late night, on a 2-lane road through the Everglades, and had been in a line of cars behind an 18-wheeler for multiple miles. She fell asleep and he was surfing for something to listen to on the radio. Only one station came in clearly enough to be tolerable, so he gave it a listen. The DJ came on and said something along the lines of, "The stars are extra bright in the Everglades tonight. If you're driving through there, pull off and take a look." He said he normally wouldn't even think of it, but for some reason felt compelled to that night. He woke up his girlfriend. She was annoyed and didn't want to, but he convinced her it would be worth it. They stopped and just took in the stars for 5 to 10 minutes. He said it was the most amazing sky he's ever seen. They get back on the road and drive another few minutes and come across a massive accident. The truck they were following had jackknifed and took out a handful of vehicles that were following. He said there were multiple fatalities, but I've never been able to find a news story about it to confirm. Probably would have been in 2005-ish. They most likely would have been involved if not for that random DJ on the only radio station to come in that night. DJ Jesus. Jesus took the radio. A good buddy of mine is a long-haul trucker for my company. A few months ago, he woke up in a parking lot surrounded by police. Some dude had gotten shot and dumped 15 feet from his truck. Was he a suspect afterwards? No. It sounded like the police already had a good idea of what happened. He gave a statement saying that he saw nothing. The guy was killed elsewhere and dumped in the parking lot by his truck. That's good he didn't get arrested or anything. Literally reposting my comment from another thread just like this. I work for a railroad. Not necessarily remote, but sometimes it's just a conductor and engineer cruising along ± 10 miles per hour on very isolated, fairly wooded track. I've heard a few older guys mention something about a family, or a man with a suitcase, something along those lines, don't really remember, walking down the track with no concerns. Constant blowing of the horn, flashing of the lights, etc. Just kept walking down the track. Then disappearing. Near Weatherly, Pa. I also experienced a pretty intense trip myself one night coming home from New Jersey. Saw my first dead body laying along the rail, which in itself was kinda interesting. Then the only other part of my trip where we were required to run at a slow speed, I heard the craziest blood-curdling scream I have ever heard in my entire life. One of the nights I will probably remember until I retire. The blood-curdling scream could have been a fox. Those things freak me the duck out when I hear them in the woods at night. Feels like I'm listening to a murder occurring. Or a mountain lion. MFS sound exactly like banshees. Yep, bobcats too. Just moved to the mountains and can confirm. Bobcats screaming sound like a woman being murdered. Also, coyotes attacking a bobcat being responded to by a house dog is a whole mess of terrifying sounds. Mountain life is crazy. I'm not a truck driver, but the story is from a truck driver. I was working the overnight shift from Friday night into Saturday morning at a gas station. At about 6 a.m. a semi pulls into the fuel aisle. Driver gets out and almost runs into the store, clearly shaken. His face is completely white and he is obviously upset. My first thought was the poor man had hit someone on the road. We get a lot of drunks walking across a 4-lane highway in front of the store. So I ask, what's wrong? He looks at me for a second and is like, I'm not crazy now. I'm thinking, great, I'm here all alone and this guy is losing it. I say, of course not. I just saw something huge on the side of the road. Like a deer or bear. We had a bear get in the dumpster last week. No bigger than a bear on its back legs. Maybe a big person? It picked up a dead buck on the side of the road and carried it over its shoulder into the woods. I can only stare at him. My brain cannot deal with this information this late in a shift. A local comes up to the counter to get his usual and the guy tells him the story. The local says, that's the Bigfoot that lives near the county line. The truck driver and I are both looking at this guy like he has two heads. He has to be joking. This trucker pays for his fuel at record speed and leaves never to be seen again. The local still insists it's Bigfoot. I just don't got in the woods cause I don't know. Oh, that's the Bigfoot, lives right over yonder. Hashtag the ducking what? He goes by Bill. Nice guy, but kinda hard to talk to. I bet you that local even said it like as if every town in a forest has a Bigfoot, everyone in that town just thinks of it as something normal. Well, that's how it used to be, a Bigfoot for every forest.